What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, there are a number of topics I want to run through because it is Monday, the day after the selection show Sunday. And I am joined by my best friend, as I always am on Mondays, Ron Taylor. Ron, what's good?
Hey, what's good, everybody?
So I want to start with the news and then get to the news. So there was news, Dabo Swinney and, well, his coach's ballot, which is amazing. And then there was news that running back TJ Pledger has entered the transfer portal. For those of you that do not know, TJ Pledger was second or third string on the depth chart this year at Oklahoma and was really instrumental in helping Oklahoma win against Texas in quadruple overtime. But with the return of Ramondre Stevenson, he has been all but non-existent. Like, it's not just that Stevenson is getting the bulk of the carries. It's that Chandler Morris had more carries against Iowa State than TJ Pledger. And Chandler Morris is the third-string quarterback. You also need to add to that, Seth McGowan was standing next to Chandler Morris in this goal line set, where Chandler Morris scored a TD. TJ Pledger announces Monday morning, yo, appreciate it. Glad I had 3 years here. I'm going to need to move on. I'm going to need to go do something else. So he's going to go do something else as the number of kiddos in the transfer portal has grown to over 150 since December 1. Like, there have been 150 new dudes in the transfer portal. And then I made this segment last night. Charlie Brewer has committed to grad transfer to Utah. It means that Utah now has Jaquindon Jackson, who was an ESPN top 300 recruit and one of the better quarterbacks in the 2020 class. You also have added in there Cam Rising from a couple years ago, who was committed to Oklahoma, then flipped his commitment to Texas, then transferred to Utah, right? You also signed a 4-star quarterback in Pete Costelli. And, like, you look around, they got 4 dudes at Utah vying for one job, where Utah has always been like a quarterback away, right? But I could say that for a number of places. Ron, places that are a quarterback away versus places that need running back. I feel like that number of quarterbacks is quarterback away schools, like what, 7, 8? Kentucky always needs a quarterback. Texas Christian always needs a quarterback. Say that, Max Duggan's quarterback. Utah always needs a quarterback. But, like, where's TJ Pledger going to end up? Like, Tulsa. That's what I said. Tulsa needs a quarterback. My bad. Tulsa needs a quarterback in the way.
I'm just saying that whether you need a running back or not, because there's going to be a lot of schools out there that like have running backs. Like, schools need quarterbacks more than they need running backs. But if you look around, if you're somebody that has the talent of TJ Pledger, and like no dig at anybody that's at a smaller school, you can probably look at your measurables versus their measurables, but plus who's coming in, who's going out. Wherever he goes, he's probably going to be the number one, right?
You would think so, but then
that's the bet,
right? Boobie Whitlow went into the transfer portal out of Auburn earlier this year. He came out at an FCS school, and Boobie Whitlow, I believe, like, led Auburn in yards per carry, and I think rushing yards in 2019. But you know what? Auburn doesn't even have a head coach right now. So, like, maybe he did make a good decision. Maybe he knew something that we, quite honestly, have all known since the day Gus Malzahn became the head coach at Auburn, which is that the day he took that job, he was on the hot seat. The man beats Alabama with Bo Nix at quarterback. Bo Nix can't close a barn door. Can't throw open a barn door. All right? So, like, but then again, Gus Malzahn had the nerve to say after winning the Iron Bowl last year that Bo Nix is going to win a lot of championships here at Auburn. Ron, you know how many championships they have won since Bo Nix joined up at Auburn?
It's somewhere between, -1 and 0.
You could say that. You could say they played themselves out of winning championships with Bo Nix at quarterback. Like, it's like that. But they got a dude coming in that I really love in Demetrius Davis coming out in North Shore. They've been juggernauts out there, right? His top wide receiver committed to Texas A&M. I can't wait to see what he looks like. But also, is he going to stay, because I think he's signed with Auburn. So whoever they bring in, I hope knows what to do with him. Right now, they're looking at Steve Sarkisian, who apparently interviewed for the job at Auburn on Sunday, Billy Napier at Louisiana, and Kevin Steele, who's already a defense coordinator there. But here's the thing. Kevin Steele had the head coaching job at Baylor. Didn't go so well. It's like 20 years ago, but it didn't go so well. So he's kind of due. Plus, Kevin Steele has been around like coaching defense in SEC since we were in high school. So Pledger goes into the portal. We'll see where he ends up. I really want Tulsa to go into the portal and get a quarterback because what they got behind Zach Smith, I'm not all the way in on. And Zach Smith's a redshirt senior. And if Zach Smith had played well against Cincinnati, probably talking about them having a shot at the New Year's Six Bowl. I say that, and then they put in a 3-loss Iowa State to the Fiesta Bowl. Go ahead, please.
No, like, I don't want to say like college football is a farce because that's why you're here. But it doesn't feel good to see Iowa State like a 3. It doesn't feel good to see any 3-loss team in a
New Year's Six Bowl.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. There's teams out there. Put somebody. Now somebody's probably gonna be like at the contract negotiations, like tie-ins and whatever. It's like then those are bad. We shouldn't have them.
Well, I mean, and you saw that, Ren. You saw that Army was gonna go to the Independence Bowl, but they got shut out due to contracts. So we got these 2-loss, or we got these 2-win and 3-win teams playing in bowl games, while 9-2 Army has to stay at home. What? All right, and then add to this, I mentioned Iowa State going to the Fiesta Bowl against what I believe is a 2-loss Oregon, okay, who played 6 games. And then Florida to the Cotton Bowl, 3-loss Florida, who caught an L to a team that had won 3 games out of their first, 8? Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And now we got Dan Mullen talking about, I'm giving the kids off until after Christmas. Then we'll get ready for bowl prep. Which means they're going to go home and catch COVID and you're going to have and cancel Cotton Bowl.
Perfect.
Ah, man. So I put this tweet out
Dan
there.
Mullen gets it.
Right. Look, he had said after the game, after they lost the SEC championship game, this might be the last time that we play this year. And you can take that wherever you want to go. Like he said it that way. And then on Sunday, after he finds out he's in the Cotton Bowl as the number 7 ranked team versus number 6 Oklahoma, he says, I'm going to give the kids off for the next 4 days. You remember the scene in Armageddon where you got Harry Stamper and Billy Bob Thornton trying to run down these dudes off the rig? And he says, when these guys get off this rig, they scatter, and they got to go through like 48 states to find all these dudes and bring them back?
Yeah.
That's what I feel like is happening at Florida right now. Like I said,
he's dedicated to making sure that they don't play the Cotton Bowl. Like, how else you can do that other than it's weird whenever you just give people the opportunity to not be a football coach, to be like a manager. Is like, hey, if this is anti-Ebenezer Scrooge actions right here. Right. But if you do this, you're messing up the money for us and them. And the people that have us to play this game.
Well, I was about to say, like the Cotton Bowl people. The Cotton Bowl people got to be like, you're going to do what? Like, because one of the things that is cool about the New Year's Six Bowls from a journalist standpoint is you get to talk to everybody. Everybody has to be made available, right? So I was wondering how they're going to pull that off in the Zoom era, because usually they just let the kids loose in like a large 100, 200 kids scrum, and then you just kind of go pick out the dude that you want to talk to. You can't do that this year. Everything is on the Zooms, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing is Kyle Pitts has already entered the NFL draft as the most dominant tight end in the country this year. That dude is not a tight end, though. I want him to go in as a wide receiver because that's what he is. They line him up on the numbers. And I feel like he's going to make less money because he's going to get drafted as a tight end and not as a wide receiver. Meanwhile, Kadarius Toney, who's had like back-to-back 100-yard games where I think he's had something close to 300 yards receiving over the past 2 games, he might enter the might enter the NFL draft. So Florida's already going to be depleted, and they're not going to want to do this. And I put this out there in relation to Texas A&M playing North Carolina in the Orange Bowl, but I feel like it really does work for Georgia against Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl, where 8 dudes are already going to be, off the team, and also the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl. What are the odds that Texas A&M, Florida, or Georgia loses their New Year's Six Bowl game and then claims that they didn't want to be there in the first place, like every SEC team that loses a New Year's Six Bowl game?
I was about to say that every time that I think of a SEC team that rolls up to the that gets bounced out of the SEC championship or accidentally stumbles right before it, they roll into a New Year's Six bowl or a bowl that has a lot of cash and get bounced by Mountain West, Conference USA,
Boise State,
second place, Pac-12 squad, whatever. And everybody says they didn't want to be there. And you watch the game, it's like, yeah, they didn't want to be there. Like, this game doesn't mean anything to them. What do I get from beating a Boise State, right? What do I get from beating the Utah? And I get the idea is like, you play to win the game. Yeah. But now they have like a honest to goodness reason to like put this into real practice as opposed to having to, go half speed in a bowl game. Not even say like, hey, it's not that we didn't want to be there, though we do. We sick. It's ravaging us, and
hey,
now we got people trying to opt out, and I know we RSVP, but we can't make it.
Do you remember when I was making the joke about Jim Harbaugh looking at the list? It says here, that says here we don't have enough players to play. So, yeah. And then you've seen, I think we're up to 20 teams that have opted out of playing in bowl games, and yet there still aren't enough bowl games for Army to play. Think about that. We had 20 teams say we're not playing in a bowl game, and yet there is no bowl game for Army to play in.
It's real un-American. Support the troops.
Speaking of un-American, these rankings are real American. These rankings are Russian oligarchy. These rankings are so wildly elitist that I have spent the last 36 hours just cutting a promo on the playoff selection committee. And I wrote about this at foxsports.com where you can read about my rankings reacts. But what it comes down to is the selection committee, year in, year out, doesn't matter who's on it, has no respect for the group of five at all. None. Zero. Pretends that it does not exist. And then you got Mac Brown with a terrible idea saying we should have a separate championship for the group of five so they can play for their little national championship. Nah, dog. No.
So they can play for their friends.
Right. And I'm saying, just expand it to 16, you cowards, and take your whooping. Because match Coastal Carolina up against North Carolina, you got a ball game. Match Cincy up against Iowa State, you got a ball game, right? Meanwhile, we got to talk about Iowa State and North Carolina getting into New Year's Six bowls because they play in the right conference and not because they're that good. I hate that so much. It will always bother me to no end. And then my man Joel Klatt has finally seen the light. He has joined the resistance. I'd like to welcome him to the resistance where we need to just expand it 16 teams. Now, the other argument that I will pick with anybody that wants to have it is this idea that you're watering down the regular season. Every game matters. Yeah, because that game Alabama played against Western Carolina last year really mattered. Right? All these teams that schedule Idaho State. Yeah, that really matters. When Georgia schedules Mercer, that really matters. When Florida plays, the Citadel, that really matters. We play 8 weeks of playoffs in Texas for high school. Like, you remember, I give everybody an example because I get that everybody's not familiar with how high school playoffs can go down in a state like Texas. But most of y'all have seen Friday Night Lights. And you'll notice what actually matters is getting in from your district. So there's right? So if you just win your district, your conference, or you finish runner-up in your district, your conference, you get into playoffs. And then the playoffs go from round, it was the biggest bracket I've ever seen in high school football, and that was 30 years ago for 5A, right? It was something like 24 teams, which, is the FCS.
Every level of college football besides the ones that we talk about the most have a playoff. Every sport that the NCAA that you play in college football has a playoff. So you say that Alabama playing the Citadel or Troy or Western Carolina, are you saying that matters? I'd say that does matter. But we make sure that it doesn't matter because we only talk about 25 teams.
Right.
Oh, those are the only teams that we give any sort of space to. because if say what you're saying is like, yeah, if Citadel or Troy or Western Carolina goes undefeated, put them in the playoff. You say, and if people talk about like the well, it would be a foregone conclusion about who wins. Like, that's March Madness. Do you think Belmont or Jacksonville State shies away from playing Duke or North Carolina in the first round every year? No. They say, cool, we'll take it on. And every now and then, I say not every now, excuse me. Once a generation, one of them pulls it off.
And that's
64-1. And the way what you're talking about is 16-1. We could play that game.
There are 130 FBS teams, and I think, what is this? 42 plus 10 is 52 plus 12 is 64 of them play in Power 5 conferences. So we're really, and lop off 1/3 of those. So we're really talking about 40 teams perhaps in any given year. But how many people would really want to see Arizona in the national championship game? They ran through the Pac-12. Probably not. It's probably the same number of people that want to see Oklahoma in there, and Oklahoma's a blue blood. That's the other thing that is upsetting about this is because I think we got better games that we could schedule. Like we're going to talk about Alabama and Notre Dame here in a little bit, but there are so many good games that could happen in this playoff system. That's what I'm most excited about because I love seeing the matchups, right? The idea that Ball State winning the MAC in an upset of Buffalo, right, gets to play the third team in the SEC East, which this year I think would be like Missouri. That'd be fun because Missouri's in their first year. They're not very good, but they should be good enough to compete with the MAC champion. While the MAC champion is like, we're the MAC champ. Who the hell is Missouri to us? We running this, and you get your magic year, right? That's what I was very upset about with the rankings yesterday is people are like, Central Florida's done it before. Yes, and that's the only year Central Florida's done it. Like, I want magic years for every year, but if it's your year, like Coastal Carolina where you're 11-0, or Cincinnati where you're 9-0, or San Jose State where you're 7-0, you really have an opportunity to do something that's never been done in your school's history. And that should be broadcast widely on television, and you should get paid for that. That's what also we're talking about is funding smaller programs because the sport is dying, right? Like the big money programs are getting rich, but when it comes to actually servicing the talent that makes up these 11,000 FBS players, we could do so much better and so much more. And we could make the sport into something that is nationally consumed week in and week out, where we don't care to be regional, where we can absolutely wonder, what if Washington, who was the Pac-12 North Division champ, gets to play against Georgia as the SEC East runner-up, right? Or Florida as the SEC East runner-up. I think that's a lot of fun. I think that's where we need to be. All right, so I want to talk about Eddie George by way of Trey Sermon, because Trey Sermon did what I told you he was going to do at Columbus, which is set the world on fire. But even Ryan Day came out and said after the game, we didn't know that he had that in him until that game because we didn't know Trey. Like, he's coming off an injury. We hadn't been able to see him because of quarantine and COVID. So he gets here, and we're not really sure. And at times, he did not look like the kind of guy that should be spelling Master Teague, let alone the feature back at Oklahoma like he once was. And he's coming off of a really bad leg injury. But against Northwestern, when Justin Fields plays the worst game of his career, Trey Sermon puts the Buckeyes on his back. 29 carries, 331 yards, only 60 yards rushing in the first half to break Eddie George's school record for rushing yards in one game. And I believe that year that Eddie George set that record, he won the Heisman in 95. I don't think Eddie George is that good. Maybe he was that good at Ohio State. I wasn't watching Ohio State football in 95. Okay.
Oh yeah, like you can look at the numbers. He was amazing at Ohio State.
Right. But in the NFL, 3.4 yards per carry. I had to watch all those Titan teams that he played on, and I'm going, why does Eddie keep getting the ball? Well, you got to remember, he was great at Ohio State. This is the NFL is what I would be yelling. I'd be yelling, this is the NFL over and over again. So that's where my Eddie George shade comes from, because I have no knowledge of this man in scarlet and gray. By the way, because everything comes back to Tulsa, the athletic director and then head coach at Tulsa football was John Cooper. Head coach at Ohio State from 88 to, I believe, 2000 was John Cooper. So John Cooper actually brought in Orlando Pace and Eddie George, among others, and got run off of Ohio State. For this dude from Youngstown State that ended up being pretty doggone good. But you get my point here. Everything comes back to Tulsa football. I'm doing this intense research on Jimmy Johnson and the Dallas Cowboys. And one of the other things that I managed to see was Jerry Rome of TU fame, coached quarterbacks at Dallas, but also on that staff early was Butch Davis, who coached not just Miami, but has Super Bowl rings. But Butch Davis had never been a head coach except one time in his entire career until he became the head coach of the University of Miami. Tulsa Rogers High School, where that squad went 3-6. Man who took over at Miami after Butch Davis stupidly went to head coach the Cleveland Browns, Larry Coker, who got started in Fairfax, Oklahoma, who coached Claremore, the Zebras, into being something like a juggernaut. Probably, was the first wave of Canards, because the Canards have been playing football like the Lockets have been playing football forever. And then was a running backs coach and offensive coordinator for John Cooper at Tulsa before going over there, making a stop, I think, at Arkansas on the way to Miami. So everything comes back to Tulsa. And I can pretty much guarantee that. Or I can play 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon with it. Wow, there's an Oklahoma State fan in this channel with a $5 super chat. He says, Pokes, pistols firing. RJ, love how you keep it real. New to your channel this year. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right, then.
So, Ron, you watched some Eddie George clips. What'd I miss?
Oh, man, this is one of those situations where, earlier this weekend, start of the week, we talked about the Orange Bowl, 91 Orange Bowl, Miami versus Texas. And we looked at the quarterbacks and like, oh, this is like a truly monstrous team out here. Like, this is just full of talent all the way around. And we looked at quarterbacks and they complete 54% of their passes. And this was good. This is All-American worthy.
They talk about Bernie Kosar slinging it, and I'm like, wait, he did what?
I'm sorry, that was 2,800 yards, you say? Lighten them up. Anyway, so whenever we talk about, like, it was just a different time. Like, I'm looking at Eddie George's stats, and I was ready to show up and just absolutely ride for him. But it's kind of one of those. That's just what it was back in the day. Only thing that I could tell you is that he kind of offset the 3 yards per carry by catching the ball a lot. I can't shrug hard enough. Like,
let me.
He averaged 1,100 yards over 9 years. Like, he's good. He's good. You don't like him, but you could probably say that he's a serviceable NFL running back. I think that he was really good.
I think Andrew Johnson just jumped in here with a $5 super chat to help your case. He said Eddie George was a 4-time Pro Bowler and 1-time first-team All-Pro with over 10,000 yards rushing in the NFL. How you hate on that? Because I watched those teams. How many Super Bowls did they win? And by the way, you know what it takes to make the Pro Bowl? The Pro Bowl? The dudes ahead of you just need to be playing in the playoffs. That's it. When I look at the number of dudes that make the Pro Bowl, I think it is the most overrated all-star event ever. And it is because it's one of the most widely watched television shows every year. But don't tell me somebody is a Pro Bowler to bolster your argument. All-Pro, that's a great one. It's really difficult to be all-Pro. That is the elite, right? That's first-team All-American. Don't tell me about some honorable mention. I don't care. Like Tyrod Taylor made the Pro Bowl at Buffalo. How many of y'all know that? I look around at some of the dudes that make Pro Bowl, I'm like, what? But I do think that, Ron, that's a good point in the 10,000 yards. That just means they gave you the ball a bunch. Because you know who would have had 10,000 yards if he just kept playing? Steven Jackson. I would take Steven Jackson over Eddie George in a heartbeat. And here's where I was going with this. Who has the better NFL career? Now that we have these stats in front of us. Trey Sermon, who might vault into the 3rd round, right? Or Eddie George, because I think Trey Sermon has some Josh Jacobs in him.
Like, are we saying that who's going to have a better pro career?
Yeah.
It's got to be Eddie George because
Okay.
you can't be. Like I say, you can't be a prime time. Eddie George is touching the ball 400 times a year for a majority of his career. Running backs just don't get the chance to do that nowadays. So
Derrick
he
Henry.
showed up. Okay, I'm not saying that all of them, but
Okay.
like there were more running backs like Eddie George in say 1998 than 2020.
I feel like you and I do this all the time, but one of the things I look at is like 70s NFL players or, early 80s NFL players. I'm like, we could play, right? And it's like, yeah, because we were raised here and not then. So I'm looking at some of these backs in the 90s, in the 80s, and going, which one of these dudes would I like more over not Derrick Henry, right? But like I said, Steven Jackson, like your Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, right? Dudes that are good, if not borderline elite. And I keep playing that game until I get to like James White, right? Until I get to like, Todd Gurley. Like it was the Rams.
You're trying to think about like you're trying to bench race like your middle class of running backs, right? Not necessarily
versus the upper
greatest
echelon
of all times
of 80s and 90s running backs. So like Roger Craig and whatnot. Now, think about it. Think about it. Man, look at us talking about 90s football. Did you play Tecmo Bowl? I feel like I played it for a little bit.
Oh yeah, I played Tecmo Bowl for like 5 years.
So why do the old folks keep telling me that Bo Jackson was colder than Christian Okoye on that game?
Because he was.
Oh man,
matter of degrees on that.
All you do is hit the spin button with Okoye, and you go to the house.
But Bo Jackson just kept on going. Bo Jackson was. Bo Jackson, video Bo Jackson. He's the best or second best video game athlete. Christian Okoye was just real good. He's just a real fun play.
Mike Vick on 04 Madden.
Yeah, that's number one.
Yeah, man. All right, so let's get to a headline topic. Dabo Swinney's coaches poll or ballot. Okay, so the one thing that I absolutely love as a in the weeds college football fan is looking at the coaches poll ballots to end the season, because you know that somebody is in their bag, but also there's a number of coaches that are in their bag that rank their team way too high. But there are also coaches that rank other teams way too low because they can't stand them. So I'm going to preface this by saying Dabo Swinney ranked Ohio State, his opponent in the Sugar Bowl, who's rated number 3, according to the Selection Playoff Committee and the Associated Press. So consensus number 3. He rated them number 11, just behind number 10 Coastal Carolina. So Dabo Swinney is really taking it hard that Ohio State got to play just 6 games and gets into the playoff. To which, I got to ask the question, how would Dabo Swinney feel about his Clemson Tigers if they only got to play 6 games because that's what the ACC said they had to do and then made the playoff? I mean,
Dabo Swinney thinks himself to be untouchable. If he got to play 6 games, and let's say that he got to play the sorriest teams on his schedule for those 6 games, he absolutely would be saying, look at us. We're destroying people 73-7. Look at us. We need to be in the playoffs. And it's like, let's say that Ohio State got to use up all their games and maybe dropped one to whoever, Wisconsin, I don't care. He would say, yeah, we absolutely deserve a chance to be in there. And he would rate Ohio State at 11 and him in the top 4.
Man,
that's what he would do.
So I wrote a story about this, and it'll be up on foxsports.com at some point. But I did some early previews of the playoff pairings, right? So in writing about Clemson, Ohio State, I have to build the bad blood here because it's there. And y'all know the one thing I love more than anything else about college football is talking noise and talking trash. And anything that involves a Woody Hayes story, I'm probably going to tell you. And this, the genesis of Clemson, Ohio State, has Woody Hayes right at the center. But before we get to that, you should know Ohio State has never beaten Clemson. And remember, Ohio State lives to beat up everybody. Everybody. And they get their persona from Woody Hayes because Ohio State was not really thought about. Not really until after World War II. Is really Michigan in that conference, okay? Woody Hayes comes along, gives them an identity that is, we take nothing off of nobody. I'm hitting anybody all the time for anything they do. And we hate that team up north. Okay, so they get the Gator Bowl in 1978. It was the last year that Woody Hayes coached Ohio State. Because in that game, as they were losing, Art Schlichter threw an interception. It was picked off by the nose guard. Shout out for the big man interception, Charlie Bauman. Charlie Bauman gets tackled by Schlichter on the sideline. Woody Hayes grabs Clemson nose guard Charlie Bauman and throat punches him. Okay? This is the end of a number of incidents that involve Woody Hayes. Clemson won that game 17-15, completed their first 10-win season in school history, and every time that Ohio State and Clemson have matched up since then, Clemson has won, dating back to the BCS and into this playoff period. And now we got a rematch of Justin Fields versus Trevor Lawrence in an Ohio State team that is not as strong as the one that we saw last year. Needed to pull out some games late against Northwestern. I mean, they went into halftime down 10-6 to Northwestern, the Big Ten championship game. Needed to pull out a late touchdown against Indiana. Just is not as strong as we would have liked them to be. That said, Dabo is out here making sure that Ohio State players are just gassed up for this game. Because I can't imagine being the head coach at Clemson and saying, why are we going to let a team that plays 6 games get in the playoff? And then say, it's like doing 60 hours toward a business degree and then getting the 4-year degree that usually takes everybody else 120 hours. And then going on to be like on ESPN, we have tremendous respect for Ohio State and ranking them 11th in your coaches poll. Like, what does he expect to do for his players in this way? Like, if you're a player, do you go up to coach and say, hey coach, calm down, please? Like, they're mad enough. or is this what you live for?
I think this is what you live for. If you play for Clemson, like if Dabo Swinney sets the tone, then the team probably follows. That, like Clemson, no, like there's cats on that squad that have like a ring. Like Clemson is high on their own supply, which I think that is like a perfectly valid thing to do. So if you see that your coach says to another team, it's like, yeah, y'all ain't anything. Look, I mean, short of calling a squad trash, then you'd say, yeah. And it's not because you're trash, it's because we're really good. You know, do the discount double check or whatever.
Right.
And you move on. If you're somebody like looking at it from the outside, like say if you're Ohio State, thank you for the bulletin board material. This is what every team lives for, to have something up on the pin board saying, everybody wishes they could say the phrase, you should have never doubted us. And now Ohio State has that.
Shout out to my best friend who got me that t-shirt that I'm going to wear on one day in particular. I love that t-shirt. It is one of the most aware things that Ron has ever given me. Just, you should have never doubted me. I love that shirt so much. But, all right, dude in here saying Dabo is undefeated against Ohio State. Yes, I made that point. And Clemson's undefeated against Ohio State. Like, that's the mood here. We're talking about 42 years of animosity being built up. And then how many kids coming after this are going to be like, did so-and-so beat Clemson? I didn't think so.
I was about to say, there's no fear or nerves here. This is like as like scot-free as you can get for like saying something sideways, because it's not really sideways. Not if you're living it, and not like if you are, I don't know, 20.
Right.
Have you ever seen Clemson beat Ohio State?
No.
Now, like you said before, it's like Clemson has built.
Or have you ever seen Ohio State beat Clemson?
Oh, exactly.
Right.
Have you ever seen Ohio State beat Clemson?
Right.
And like you say, like we know that Ohio State has built a brand on being just as big and as like actually the biggest, the fastest, and the strongest. And like they are absolutely some world beaters, except for this one team.
Yes. And I love that so much because I have all this Ohio State history in my brain. I have all this Clemson history in my brain. I have all this Alabama history. I have all this history in my brain. Matter of fact, one day you and I are just going to have to give like a whole hour to Willie Williams and that saga.
Please.
Because That I just read up on that here recently. And as recruiting stories go, that's an all-timer. I really love that one. The number of coaches that also believe that Texas A&M is a top 4 program this year was also jaw-dropping. Because Texas A&M hadn't beat anybody but Florida and lost by 28 to Alabama. And yet there are people that just believe in Texas A&M because they believe that they're a part of this power club. Texas A&M ain't won no national championship since 1939. Clemson is more powerful than A&M. And, irony of irony, Jimbo Fisher was probably the biggest Clemson fan in history on Saturday and still wasn't able to crack the top 5. Or top 4, excuse me. Barely at number 5, and I hated that. What else do I have on this rundown? Oh! So, you said you rewatched the... go, please.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say, the thing about these coaches polls is that most of these coaches absolutely do not give any time to these coaches polls.
Oh, yeah.
At all. So if you see a whole bunch of like Texas A&M's at 6, 5, and 4 on the coaches polls, it's because like they won. They probably caught that on ESPN, Sports Center, whatever. And then the week before, they saw that they had them at 5. I don't know, because the week before they had them at 6, and the week before they had them at 8. And I guess if they keep on winning, they only have one loss. Fine, put them there. They don't care because most of them aren't even playing them.
One other thing that I want to point out is I'll never forget
copying their own homework.
I talked to one head coach like on the side as he's leaving the podium, and I said, "So who'd you vote for?" Because he had a coach's ballot that year, and he said, "I don't know. Ask my SID." I was so hurt because I was still not completely awakened to how college football works in the way that I am now. But I just would ask, how many of these dudes absolutely, positively care about these polls? And truth is, like you say, they don't. They only care where their team is and in relation to what they've heard about other teams. Like Brian Kelly was talking about Notre Dame, Alabama, saying, yeah, I've seen their scores. They're a buzzsaw. And you know what? He's not wrong. But it also means, like, he hadn't watched any Alabama football. Like, he was going to watch Alabama football for the first time today. At film. Be like, oh, this is what we got to deal with. Damn it, right? It's one of those. Oh, Rajon Davis decommitted from LSU? Okay. Ron, just let me 2 seconds on this. Rajon Davis was the highest committed prospect in the 2021 class to LSU. I thought he signed his national letter of intent. Apparently he did not. Linebacker. And a borderline 5-star. So that's, okay. I'll have to do something about that a little bit later on. So we got Alabama, Notre Dame in the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl has moved from Pasadena to AT&T Stadium, which means that we're going to get the Cotton Bowl and the Rose Bowl. We hope the Cotton Bowl and the Rose Bowl at AT&T Stadium back-to-back days. All right. Alabama opened as a 17.5-point favorite. Like, I was talking about this with my boss at Fox Sports, and he's like, what do you think they open at? I think 18. I think 18 is a funny number. 17, and then 17.5 is what we hit on. So, cool. And then the number moved. And then it moved again. And right now it's at 20.5. Nobody, absolutely nobody, expects Notre Dame to be competitive against Alabama in the Rose Bowl. So much so that there's a group of us that are like, why not just give Alabama the bye? Which led me to make an analogy about the replacements. And Ron, having watched the replacements here lately, I want to see if you think this fits. For those of you who aren't familiar, the NFL went on strike in 1987. Owners were going to play games anyway because they had this upstart USFL that they really wanted to keep at bay. And turned out the USFL, like the World Football League, like every other league that has come since the NFL merged in 1969 with the AFL, hadn't been worth a damn in comparison to the NFL. But they went and got, replacement players, or the more derogatory term, scabs, to go play in the same jerseys as the dudes that you wanted to see play NFL football. And those dudes had a good time. And the messaging behind the replacements, I do not agree with. Like, adult me has some sincere problems with how we are labeling labor versus ownership. But there is one scene in the replacements that I think fits for what Notre Dame is looking at right now. It is Jimmy McGinty huddling the team up in the second half as they're down to a group of players that have crossed the picket line to go play for their team, who understand that this is the last football game that they are going to play. This is the last half of pro football they're ever going to play. So McGinty makes that clear to them. This team that you're playing ought to be afraid of you because there is no tomorrow for you. And that makes you all very dangerous people. And I believe in that principle most of all. You do not want the smoke from somebody who has nothing to lose. You don't want the smoke from a wounded animal. Notre Dame got embarrassed in its first and probably only chance to win an ACC title, conference title at all. So much so that there are people that are saying Notre Dame should not be in the playoff. And now they are the sacrificial lamb to the machine that is the Tide. I believe that if they approach this game as if they have nothing to lose, we could get us a ball game. Ron, do you think that analogy fits, or am I off with that?
I think that it's really poetic. Like you touched me with those words, but I don't think that you can apply this underdog spirit to Notre Dame football. I think that they are too big of an organization and a brand to be able to look at Alabama and think of themselves as the little giants. Like it just does not work. Notre Dame has to believe that they have to believe in the myth of, being a golden domer to perpetuate that. Like they're not small time. Like we know that they've had hard times. We know that they get rolled a lot, but they're also the squad that took down modern day Clemson. They're going to look at Alabama and say, cool, we got a shot, but not because, we're some of this scrappy little upstart. Like, we are expletive Notre Dame. And that's how they're going to roll into it. Now, you're right. They might feel they have their backs against the wall. But once again, if everybody, no matter how big you are, you could be King Arthur with the sword and the scabbard. But if somebody says, you don't have the odds, congratulations. You should have never doubted me.
Can you say we are expletive Notre Dame when you are winless in New Year's Six Bowls during this century? And that's as far back as I chose to look. Like, they lost the Orange Bowl. They lost the Sugar Bowl. They lost the BCS championship. They lost the Cotton Bowl. They look like they're about to lose the Rose Bowl. Like, who are you if we put you in these games and you continue to catch L's? Like, as much shade as people want to throw at Oklahoma being in these positions, Oklahoma won a national championship in 2000. Does anybody know the last time that Notre Dame won a national championship?
I don't remember.
I think it was 88. All right, let me go check.
Go
ahead.
Anyway, Notre Dame is gassed up, and if whenever the time that I don't think there's going to be a time anywhere in the near future, as long as they continue to be a squad that
I was right, 88. Sorry,
good on you. That as long as they continue to be a squad that every committee will give a shot at the national championship when they finish the season with one loss, they're going to feel that their privilege is earned. They're going to continue that. They're never going to run out of fuel for the fire of thinking that Notre Dame is a top tier school. And like right now they are, but looking at like the people in the playoffs right now, it's like Notre Dame is better than they are last year, but they're not, I don't think that they are a great squad. Clemson is not as good as they were last year. Ohio State's not as good as they were last year. Alabama is much better than they were last year. So, yeah, they're going to roll into it. They might they might look at it as an uphill battle, but not that they're an underdog.
Man,
Ugh.
I don't know. Like, I feel this way when we talk about Oklahoma football, especially like last year going into Peach Bowl, right? It's a similar spot. All right, and I would argue that the 2018 team was better than the 2019 team, and the 2017 team was better than both of those.
Mm-hmm.
But in thinking about Notre Dame and where they ought to think about themselves, I can't make someone reasonable. I wish I could, because I think the world would be a much cooler place if we could do reason. But that's not what we're going to be able to do with Domers. Okay? If you go into this Rose Bowl and you get destroyed, how do you feel about yourself? That is where I would want to start the conversation with them. Would that be enough for you to be like, we're good, we're not that good? Like, the only dyed in the wool and smart Notre Dame fan that I know, smart meaning the man actually goes and reads about the team, reads about what's going on, and also takes a look at college football, is KJRH sports anchor, sports director, Cade McFarland. Very cool dude. Had him on the show before. And after Notre Dame got destroyed 34-10 in the ACC championship game, a game in which they didn't score their first touchdown until the fourth quarter in garbage time, he said, no, we do not want Bama. Because I think, smart college football fans, like the ones that are smart about Oklahoma, most of the ones I know, we're like, no, we don't want any part of a college football playoff. Please, no. We'd like to win a bowl game this year. And even this one that they're supposed to play against Florida is, for me, a pick'em, where the over-under is lower than this, but I still think the over-under is like 100. Because Todd Grantham hasn't been fired yet. So that means that Engage 8 is still, going to be called every other play. And Oklahoma's defense is actually pretty good the last 7 games. They've won 7 in a row. Right? I think that when we talk about Notre Dame, too often we're talking about who the quarterback is and who the head coach is, and not enough about what the defenses look like. That said, Brian Kelly said we're a different football team than we were in 2012, and I said I hope so. I'm listening on the Zoom call too with Saban, and Saban's like, yeah, we changed some stuff too. I'm like, man, you know what? They did. And I was thinking about this. Notre Dame's running a 3-4 with Bob Diaco as defensive coordinator, who I think won the Broyles Award that year. Bob Diaco just got fired from Purdue after doing a good job at La Tech and being an analyst at Oklahoma. He had Manti Te'o, among others, in the middle of his defense. And that Notre Dame team beat Oklahoma at home. Same night James Harden got traded from the Thunder to the Rockets. That's how long ago that was. But you know what Alabama was doing then? Alabama was still playing murder ball. They were still running play action off of legit I formation stuff. Now to see what Nick Saban has become offensively is to marvel at Nick Saban. Because listening to him on this Zoom call, Ron, I still hear a defensive coordinator. That's all I hear. I hear a guy say, we evolved with the sport. We evolved with the sport. Like, that's what we did on the field. Like, we didn't change our culture or any of those things that make us into the character team we are. We evolved with the sport. And I was also thinking about it in this way. The first, dyed-in-the-wool Power 5 team to convert to the nickel was, as a base defense? Alabama. They did that almost immediately after getting shown up in the 2011, I think it's 2011 National Championship game. What was it?
I'll look it up.
Because I think they were playing LSU. But this is like when they go from their 260-pound middle linebackers to quite literally just playing with a star, a nickel, every snap. He's noticing what other teams are doing to him before he's noticing what his teams are doing to them, is my point there. I also have to...
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's the point that I'm getting at. No matter when they actually made that change. But he didn't actually make that change to the offense, not for real, until Lane Kiffin got there. And I can only imagine what it was like for Lane Kiffin to try to convince Nick Saban that this is what they needed to do. And then probably points to Johnny Manziel and said, so we can do that. We don't have to get that done to us anymore. Sure. But we can do that to other teams if you just let me go get Blake Sims.
I was about to say, if you let me, like, give me the opportunity to have a Heisman level quarterback, and we can fly. Because I remember that time too. It's one of those that, man, Nick Saban really, like, these are the losses that Nick Saban has caught, and it's Heisman winner, Heisman winner, Heisman winner, Heisman runner up, Heisman winner. It's like, wow, I guess that's what it takes to beat Nick Saban. And then what happens? What happens? Nick Saban says, "Cool, I want that," and then does that for the next 5-6 years.
Other part about Nick Saban that I think is underrated is he's probably the best secondary coach in the world. When I watch his kids play technique and I watch their footwork, I'm always amazed. And you can tell that that's a defensive back that is teaching other dudes how to play defensive back so well that I swore up and down D. Milner was going to be the truth. I swore up and down he's going to be the truth in the NFL. No, I was right about Minkah Fitzpatrick. Good for me. But, like, how many dudes have we been wrong about that played defensive back at Alabama?
Not very many.
Yeah, like Trayvon Diggs is playing with that reputation right now for the Cowboys because I watch too much Cowboys football for my own good. But outside of that, like, the dudes that come out of that system know what they are doing, and the dudes that play nickel in that system become all pros in the NFL. Like, it's that good. It's that awesome. I'm also noticing what Brian Kelly has allowed his team to evolve into. Like, you were the first person to actually put this out there and acknowledge this in a meaningful way. So I want to give Ron all the props in the world on this. I said, what do you think of Ian Book? Right? So many people want to make that dude a drop back pocket passer, right? An old school NFL white dude at quarterback. And Ron was like, no, you put this kid from California out in space. He's cooking. Why are they having him stand back there? Just an athlete, as they say, an athlete. And what? It's like Brian Kelly heard you. Because as soon as they started moving him out, and, you know, like, my favorite play on Madden ain't levels because I'm not that kind of quarterback. My favorite play is flood to one side or the other. Play action boot. Give me those. Because now I have a quarterback that can also hurt you. And I think if Notre Dame can do that against Alabama, they got a shot. Because Florida exposed just how good Alabama's defense is not. Like, we'd all been talking about how great Alabama's defense was leading up to this SEC championship game. And then Kyle Trask throws for 408. And there are 200-yard receivers for Florida. And they put up damn near 500 yards and 46 points. Notre Dame is capable. I just don't know if they can do it.
Yeah, I was cold. I've been cold on Kyle Trask all season. I shouldn't be. Like, that dude's been whipping it around. He's good. Today I was listening to College Football Nerds. They're very good. And they said something that they said it in such a fashion, like, in a way that we have talked about for years, and that it's easier to play offense than defense.
Right.
But they said that there's a limit to how good your defense can be compared to how good an offense can be. No matter what kind of scheme you run, no matter what kind of athletes that you have, if the offense has as good athletes or better, you can only be so good. And that's when we talked about Nick Saban making the adjustment from being a murder ball member to somebody that creates Heisman winning quarterbacks. To me, that game is a perfect example of that. Is that and also the Ole Miss game is that if somebody has your number on offense, they're going to continue to hit it. So it's your job to match them point for point. So you're right that like Alabama has a weakness, or they might not be as strong as they'd like to be. But do you think that Notre Dame is going to pressure them as hard as Florida did? Because
in a different way, mm-hmm. Right? Because, like, the way that they were using Kyle Pitts to free up Kadarius Toney for one-on-one coverage is what you're going to have to do. I just don't know that they have a Kadarius Toney. Maybe Javon McKinley's that guy. Maybe Avery Davis is that guy. But they are loaded at tight end, right? Ben Skowronek and Michael Mayer are outstanding. And Notre Dame has become something of a tight end U, if not an offensive line U. So if they're able to match those dudes up against Malachi Moore in the slot, Brian Branch on the slot, and win, you got a different ball game. Difference is, I thought Brian Branch and Malachi Moore were good enough to take away Kyle Pitts. Now, I'm expecting a lot of 2 true freshmen. That's on me, right? I put too much on them as true freshmen going against a third-year player who 100% knows what he's capable of and is bigger than them. So maybe you try to take advantage of that if you are Kelly, because that is where the game is for me offensively. If you can get Michael Mayer or Ben Skronik to take away Malachi Moore or get matched up against Jordan Battle or Brian Branch, you can win. You have to also just go after Josh Jobe because you don't want no parts of Patrick Surtain. You don't want those. You don't want that problem. That dude might win the Thorpe Award. He was on my finalist list. He's that good. But you don't have to, right? That's the thing. You don't have to throw at Patrick Surtain. You're just going to have to put Josh Jobe out there and say, beat us. If you can beat us, we lose this game. That also is a good question for me to see answered as it relates to ACC versus SEC. Because one of the things that we lamented this year was the lack of common opponents. Even though it didn't matter if you were a group of 5 team because Louisiana beats Iowa State. Coastal Carolina beats Louisiana, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, I want to see if the second best team in the ACC even holds a candle to the best team in the SEC and what that might look like. You know, because then I think we could talk about maybe the ACC is closing the gap. Maybe. Probably not, but maybe. So, like, score prediction. What do you think the point differential is? Not necessarily how many points you think is going to be scored between Notre Dame and Alabama.
Ask that one more time.
What do you think the point differential is going to be between Notre Dame and Alabama in the Rose Bowl?
And I don't say this with a lot of joy, but I'm going to say damn near 30. Because looking at the teams that I would not say that compared to, but that had the same kind of eyeball test, Alabama killing them, but and I say killing them, but they're just a very dominating squad. I don't see where Notre Dame can get into a dogfight or a shootout with them. They got to pick one, and it's going to be 30 both ways.
To your point, the last time Saban and Kelly, Notre Dame and Alabama squared up, BCS championship game, Alabama beat them in Miami 42-14. Right at 30 points. I would also add this. If Kyron Williams can be of use to you, not good, just of use to you, against Christian Harris and Dylan Moses in the middle, with Christian Barmore and DJ Dale in the middle, then you have more than a puncher's chance. You ought to win that football game because their front 7 is really good. Front 6 at Alabama is really good. But Kyron Williams, I thought, was really good, and then he didn't do much against Notre Dame. As a matter of fact, it was flipped. Travis Etienne couldn't run the ball at all against Notre Dame in South Bend, and then rushed for 10 or 124 on 10 against them in the ACC championship game. Meanwhile, Kyron Williams had like 50 yards rushing total, and he was a monster, like with a 50-yard run to open the game in South Bend. So that's one that I'm looking at. All right, so I do want to dig a bit into Ohio State Clemson before we get out of here, because big game. I've been asked repeatedly, do I still think that Justin Fields is a better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence? I've given my answer on that. I think it's a flavor contest, right? Do you prefer Pepsi or Coke, right? Is that where you still are after what Justin Fields did, which was, I think, like 12 of 23 for 114 with 2 picks against Northwestern?
I'm cooling off of where I was at the beginning of the year, where or after the first game, where we were like, "No, Justin Fields is it," and he still is. I still think he's probably going to be I think he's a better pro prospect. But as far as like performing for the year,
right,
he's been fine to very good. Nowhere near as what we like the elite production that we assumed he was going to have at the beginning of the season.
Let me spit some facts at you right now. Ron affectionately calls me a glass cannon with this stuff, and I've come to calling myself that because I consume a bunch. I retain some of it, not nearly as much of it as I would like to, because I was just going back over notes that I made from books that I read this year. I'm like, man, I forgot about that totally. Like, For instance, I forgot Sean Alexander was so good in high school, they retired his number before he graduated. Right? Right?
I would never forget that.
What? I forgot that.
I'd be eating on that my entire life.
Like if you were Sean Alexander, but as me consuming all this knowledge about Sean Alexander, I forgot that was one of the things that happened to him.
Yeah.
And his cousin, Devontae Smith, another Devontae Smith, signed with Alabama, right, to play corner. One of the things that I wanted to hammer is when I wrote this profile of Justin Fields about a month ago, one of the things that he had made clear, he wanted to get back to this game. And one of the things that Avant, his father, had related to me is that he wanted to get back to this game. And they weren't so clear about saying that they wanted to play Clemson, but you could tell that if they had an opportunity to play Clemson again, it's exactly what they would want. Because what has been cool about Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence and watching them over the last 3 years is that it has been a yin and yang situation. It has been an Agent Smith and Neo situation. They need each other. They need each other so that we understand just how good they are. In the same way that we might look at some of the all-time rivalries and say they need each other. What is OU without Texas? Right? We've already seen what OU is without Nebraska, and it sucks. Right? We got our first taste of what is Ohio State without Michigan, and it sucks. I'm so giddy that I get to see Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields go into a pitcher's duel once again. That said, the better tailback is over at Clemson still. The better wide receiving core is over at Ohio State. But the better defense is still Clemson. And that is, I can't tell y'all how impressive that is. Because I've watched 5 first-round picks play for Brent Venables' defense. And every year, they're good. At Clemson. Not Alabama, not Florida State, not Miami, not Florida, at Clemson. Clemson is too small to be this good. And yet, here they are. So, knowing what we know about the wide receiving core at Ohio State, which has at least 2 first-round draft picks on it right now, maybe 3 or 4, depending on how you feel about Jackson Smith and Jigba and Julian Fleming as freshmen. Gary Wilson's going to get drafted next year in the first round. Chris Olave is likely to get drafted in the first round this year. Do you think that Ohio State's secondary has more on its shoulders to try to put the clamps on Amari Rodgers, E.J. Williams, Cornell Powell than Ohio State has on its shoulders to try to run it up against the secondary that hadn't been tested? And the last time that, somebody went at Clemson's secondary with A.J. Terrell, who was a first-round pick, they got destroyed. LSU just went after him, just ate him alive. Where do you think those two units need to separate? Do you think Ohio State's secondary needs to separate, or do you think, Clemson's secondary needs to separate, or Ohio State's wide receiving core needs to separate?
And this is we've talked about this before. Is like they got a huge hole in their armor. Ohio State does.
Nice.
This is I was about to, yes, thank you. It's on them to slow the game down, and that's where because I know it, Clemson knows it. Attack Ohio State secondary, and you're going to be able to put points in the yards on the yards through there, points on the board. It makes everybody else work so much harder because I don't think Ohio State's secondary can't there's no parachute for them,
right?
And you're going up against an Trevor Lawrence. I like Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is a very good quarterback. Their offense is Travis Etienne is great, and their receivers are good. But Trevor Lawrence is somebody who is drift compatible with the play callers. That's I'd say that is, as a college quarterback, his greatest talent is that he runs the offense exactly how you draw it up. And if you're somebody like Ohio State, they're going to attack you and they're going to hit their marks. And you're just going to be looking at the D line. You're going to be looking at the quarterbacks. You're going to be looking at your offense coordinator. You're going to be looking at the refs like, please help us out. That, like, to me, that's the game. It's not the game, but that's the biggest part of the game.
No, I mean, that's a great point. That's a very good point. I would also add Clemson is going to be without their best defensive back to start the first half, who got tossed out of the game with a targeting call in the second half of the ACC championship game. I'd also point to this. Ohio State plays single high man coverage. I would caution them against that. I'd want to split the halves or split the field with safeties, and I'd want to play a bunch of zone. And I try to zone blitz, but that ain't what they do. What they do is put Josh Proctor, Tulsa stand up, over the top, or Marcus Hooker over the top for the most part, drop that safety down in the nickel to try to take away the tight end, and then hope your linebacker can eat. I don't think that's going to work against Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence is college football's version of Aaron Rodgers right now. You can give him lesser wide receivers, and he'll still be just as good, if not better. All he needs is that one dude, like a Devontae Adams, and he's got that one dude in Amari Rodgers. Because you get that dude out in space, he's going to cook you. He can take your top off your defense. Fields is a different kind of cat, right? And I like different kinds of cats. I like cats who can do something with their legs, but are a passer first. But more than that, people want to follow Justin Fields into fights. That is an underrated quality. To be as cool-headed as he is and to have everybody want to follow you into whatever fight you choose to join is an underrated quality. So we'll see how that works out. I'm excited about that game. Last question for you, Ron. Not who do you think is going to win the Heisman, but who do you think deserves to win the Heisman? Who is going to win the Heisman? Yeah, I mean, just throw a name. Don't do that. Just throw a name. It's not that hard.
Mac Jones.
Okay.
There you go. Kyle Trask. There you go. Kyle Trask. That's the one.
Kyle Trask?
Trask.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll go with that. I bring that up because Najee Harris put together a better season than Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram did when they won the Heisman. He has all the career records, it seems, for a running back at Alabama. He had 5 Go ahead.
I was like, can I say that? Can we throw up? Mark Ingram seems to be a nice gentleman. Can we throw out his Heisman? Because it feels like every single running back every year outperforms his Heisman year.
Yeah.
Every year. Yeah. Without fail. So can we not use him as a metric for Heisman winning running backs?
Okay, here's one.
Please. Okay.
Christian McCaffrey and Deshaun Watson didn't win the Heisman Trophy. Do you remember who won that Heisman Trophy? I just said his name. Derrick Henry.
No, thank you.
Why? Also, another fact that I forgot until I went over my notes, looking at the Sean Alexander notes. The year Christian McCaffrey was drafted, he was the only white tailback in the NFL. There have only been 4 white tailbacks since 1974 who have featured.
Okay.
This is back when we were just like legitimately having that question about white dudes running sub 4.2, sub 4.4.
Yeah. So you said what was your cutoff?
74.
74. All right, I'm gonna guess. Christian McCaffrey, Mike Allstott,
fullback,
Peyton Hill,
fullback.
He was a feature.
No.
Back,
Hey,
though.
I'm saying no. Look, I'm going by because the position matters. Like putting running back or TB next to it and not FB matters in this context because I could find a bunch of like Zonka types because that's why the number matters.
That was gonna be my next one.
Okay,
like, I'm done. I have nothing else because I mean you said feature backs like who featured like that's
because like you could say
fullback
because like John Riggins featured right, but is he a fullback or is he a tailback?
I mean, if you get to like 250 carries, the distinction between fullback and tailback is
the distinction between tight end and wide receiver. I get it. I'm just telling you what kind of math was being used. I'm not saying it was right or wrong, right? Because I did what you did. It was like, wait a second. I can come up with at least 8. I can come up with at least double that number, but those dudes are all classified as fullbacks. Like Toby Gerhart, classified as a tailback. Does he look to you like a tailback? No. Did they line him up as the end of an I formation? Yes. You know, like, those conversations matter. That's why, right? Because, like, when I was doing that, yeah, I could come up with more than that. Because, like, I'm like, wait, Rex Burkhead. Danny Woodhead.
That's true. Danny, yeah, all right.
So, like, that was the reason I brought it up. And then I was going to unpack it by saying this is a very narrow view of what a running back is, of what a tailback is.
It is. Yeah, so, you're right.
So, for all the folks that say it's about race.
So you cut my piece into 8 pieces. I don't like that.
Sorry,
into 16 pieces.
Right. Like, and that's, you know, like, you and I have been talking about positionless football since college. So, like, what happens when we take you try to tell me that the refrigerator Perry wasn't no tailback?
I know. I saw Chris Cooley get a couple handoffs. You tell me that doesn't count?
I vividly remember Gerald McCoy as the up back taking handoffs. Oh, man. I love that. All right. That is Ron Taylor, who is kind enough to do this with me. Let me drag him through this thing called college football every Monday.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be here. Don't be like this is some sort of burden.
Well, hey, look, this is the second.
I love to talk to the folks.
This is the second most watched stream that I've done all year.
Mm.
And this one has, like, no news associated with it. The most watched one was yesterday, and that was right because I was talking about the selection show right as it was happening. So, like, over 1,000 people showed up to that one. Over 900 people have shown up to this one. It's very cool. I appreciate all of y'all for showing up. I keep telling you, I keep teasing that I have this thing that I get to tell y'all about, but it ain't all the way done yet. But best believe, I can't wait to tell you. I just wanted to be all the way done. I mean, if you ain't figured it out by now, you don't really watch this channel. That's just what it is. It's like the people that are jumping into the comments, like literally every video now going, what is a step mill? I don't know. Would somebody tell me why he keeps saying that? No, I won't. Let somebody in the comments tell you that.
Man, you better hit them with like this Christmas special on Step Mill.
I got to go to Christmas too. Nah, man. They might get a rerun on Christmas. Yeah. I've been fond of the reruns. Yo, this is old. The news already happened. Yeah, man. It's a rerun. That's how that's working.
Yeah. Watch with that year one.
Watch that segment. If you like the channel, please like this video and subscribe to the channel because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. I will catch y'all in a couple hours. If I don't catch you on your local Fox Sports Radio affiliate, I'm going to be doing segments about the college football playoff from 3 to 6 across the country. Probably tweet about it. Deuces.